Hello everyone. So we'll start off by building the header section. So as you can see here, we have a column of items. We have an image, a text widget showing a greeting, and then a text widget showing the headline. So let's look at how to build that. So what we have so far is this column of widgets, and then we're rendering the header section, the badges section, projects, and footer. And each of them just has an empty size box widget. Now you'll also notice that I prefix all of these methods with an underscore. And if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming, you don't have to worry about this. And this is also just a detail. Essentially, in many languages, having an underscore before class properties, either methods or instance variables, means that these properties are private. In Flutter, not only is this a convention, but it also enforces that these methods or instance variables are private. So let's start off with the header. So here we want to render a column. Then I'll have an array of children. So let's start off with the image. So you can use a circle avatar, and this takes in a background image. And it will take an image of type asset image. And we want to give it the URL. So if we look at the folder structure, we have assets, images, and then profilepic.png. So here I'll say assets, images, then profile-pic.png. We also have a radius property, so I'll say radius of 100. And you can see that the image appeared. Next thing we want to add is a text widget for the headline. So I'll say text. So this will actually be the greeting. So I'll say hello world. And then I'm Mohammed. Save that. And you see that it appeared under it. Next we'll copy that. And then the second one will be the headline. So I'll say software engineer. Like that. Save. So there's a few things that we can see here. So if we look at this column, and let's wrap it with, so if you want to wrap items, you can click on a particular widget and you'll see this light bulb. If you click on it, it will tell you we can wrap with another widget, a center widget, a column widget, a container, and so on. So if I click on wrap with container, you'll see it wrapped it with a container. And now I can give it a color of colors.red. And what this will allow us to do is see what the size of the column is. So you can see that the column is taking as much space as what the content allows it to take. It's not taking the whole screen, but we want it to take the whole screen. So what we're going to do is wrap this column with a size box widget, and then we'll give it a width of double.infinity. So we want it to take as much space as it can. So now you can see that the column took the entire screen. So now let's remove this container. So I'll do this and then remove this widget, save that, and you can see that we no longer have the red color. Now a few things that we want to add some space at the top. We want to add some space between the image and the greeting, and some space between the greeting and the headline. So at the top here, I'll say const size box, height, let's say 32. Copy that, move this down. So I'll say this one is 24. And then move this, and then let's say 8. So you can see we have some spacing between all of them. Now, if you also notice that for me, this image doesn't actually require a circle avatar. So I can just take this out from here, paste it here. I'll say image.asset, and then I'll give this a width of 100. Let's make it 200. So that's because my image doesn't actually require to be circular, because I have this part at the top, which is coming out of the circle itself. However, for you, if you want it to be a circle image, then you can use the circle avatar widget. Next, let's add some styling to the text. So we'll start off with the greeting style. So I'll come here, say style, text style, and I'll give it a font size of 22 and font weight dot. So here you can either have bold or normal, or you can have values between 100 and 900. So I can say W400, and you can see that so let's see what 900 looks like, and let's see what 100 looks like. So 900 is completely bold, and then 100 is gonna have a light theme. So we'll go back to 400. Next, let's add the heading textile. So I'll come here, say style, text style, and then I'll say font weight is equals to font weight dot bold, and then font size is equals to 28. Now you see that the text is not centered. So to fix that, we can say text align dot center. Let's also do the same thing for the greeting, just in case you have a long greeting. Another thing that we'll notice is that if we make the screen smaller, you can see that the text is touching the side of the screen, but we don't want that to happen, so I'll wrap both text widgets in a padding. So I'll come here and then wrap this in a padding widget. And what the padding widget allows is to give this some padding around this particular widget. You can either say all to give a padding from the top, bottom, left, and right, or you can say symmetric and just specify horizontally. So horizontal, we want 16. That means that from the sides, we want a padding of size 16. If I save this, you'll see that now there's some padding. Now let's do the same thing for this widget above, just in case you have a long greeting. So I'll say padding, and then I want it symmetric, and then horizontal, and of size 16. Yeah. Another thing, I want to add some custom colors. So I will create a constant file. So under lib, I'll say new folder, utilities, and then I'll create a new file called constants.dart. So I'll say const k blue color is equals to color, and then 0xff2980b9. And we need to also import the material package. So if we go here and import material. So here we'll see a few things. So in Flutter, having a lowercase k before a constant name is just a convention. And then here, this is how we create a custom color. This 0x is saying that this is a hexadecimal number. And if you're familiar with RGBA, so any color can be created using values from red, green, blue, and alpha. Alpha is the transparency. So 0 would be fully transparent, and then a full value would be fully opaque. Now, each of these values is essentially a number from 0 to 255. And let me just quickly get a hexadecimal calculator. So if you look at this, so a hexadecimal number of FF becomes 255 in decimal. So that's why you see this FF at the beginning. So the first value is actually the alpha value, so the transparency. So we're saying that this value is not transparent at all. And then the next we have RGBA, so 29 as a hexadecimal number. So if we say here 29, you can see that it's actually 41 in decimal, and so on. Next, I'll just paste some other colors. And now we can use these colors in our application. So if I go back to main, I can go to the textile here, and then I can say color is equals to k dark gray. And once I did that, it just imported the package for me. Let's also do the same thing for the headline. That looks good. So the next step that we want to do is add the different social media links. So we want to add LinkedIn, Instagram, and so on. So to do that, we want to add two packages. So we'll go to pub.dev. So this is similar to npm if you're familiar with the Node environment, and it's essentially third-party packages. So the two that we're interested in are Font Awesome. This will give us the icons that we want. So actually the one we want is Font Awesome Flutter. And another thing that you should notice is you can see the platform support. So this is supported on Android, iOS, Linux, macOS, web, and Windows. And then here we can go to installing and we can find this. So Font Awesome Flutter, we copy that, and then we go to pubspec.yaml. And then under dependencies, we're going to say or paste Font Awesome Flutter. Another package that we want is URL launcher. So if we go here and we say URL launcher, this will allow us to click on a link and then route to another page. So for example, let's say we want to link to your GitHub or link to your LinkedIn. We'll use this package to link to it. And we can go to installing and then dependencies. So I'll copy this, paste it here. And you'll notice once we save, Flutter runs flutter pub get. You could also do it manually. So if you do flutter pub get, this will get all the packages. And also there is a button here on VS Code to get the packages as well. Let's go back to main.dart. Let me just close everything else. So with URL launcher, there is just a few configurations that we have to do. So it says here, for iOS, add any URL schemes passed to can launch as entries to info.plist. So basically, we need to add permissions for the application to be able to make calls to HTTPS or HTTP. So we'll copy this, and then here I'll do Command T, and this will allow us to search for a file. I'll say info.plist. And essentially this is just a key value pair file in for iOS, and we can just, as you can see here, the key has this value of ls application query schemes, and then the value is an array. So we can just put it anywhere after a particular value. So we can put it here, for example, and I'm just gonna indent it. And this will give us the necessary permissions for iOS. Now we actually have to do something similar for Android. So if we go to Android manifest, and under Android manifest here, we need to paste this. And this is also Android's way for giving permissions to access HTTPS. We'll go to main.dart. And right now, let's render the social media links. So we'll go down under the headline and let's add another size box. And I'll make this 16. And there's multiple ways to render items in a row. So one way is we can have a row widget, and it takes in an array of children. And then we can add icon buttons. And then this takes in a function. So functions that are like this, they're called anonymous functions because you don't give it any name, or they're called inline functions. Now you could separate this logic into a function that's outside. So for example, here you can say void underscore handle link press, and then here you would change this to underscore handle link press. However, for us right now, I just want to keep it in the widget itself. So let me just remove that. And then for the icon, we will use font awesome. So we can say const font awesome icon, and then font awesome icons.linkedin, and then color is equals to k blue color. Then let me just add some comments. So you can see that the LinkedIn icon was added here. So let's look at a few things. Let's say we want to center this. So under row, we can say main axis alignment, and then main axis alignment dot center. Now this works. However, if you have multiple items, so let's just duplicate this a bunch and then save that. So you can see once it overflowed again, we got this error. So in order to fix that, instead of using a row widget, we'll use a wrap widget. And then instead of the main axis alignment, we will say alignment, and then wrap alignment dot center. And anything that overflows just goes to the next screen. Also here you can see that the buttons are right next to each other. So we can give some spacing. So there's two properties. There is spacing, and here we can give 8. And then there is run spacing. Run spacing is between the different rows, the space between the rows, and then spacing is the space between the items. So now if I save this, so you can see now we have a bit more space with every item. We can change this, for example, to 16. So we can say 16, and you can see now there is a lot more space. So we're going to need a few links. So we want one for LinkedIn, one for GitHub, and so on. But first, let's add the logic for the press. So what happens when a user actually presses on this link? So we'll look at adding the logic for launching the URL. And for that, we'll use the URL launcher library. So first thing we want to do is define the URL we want to go to, and then we will say https www.linkedin.com. So for you, you're going to use the link for your profile, but for me, I'm just using a general link. And then let's create a variable is launchable. And then we can say await can launch, and then pass in the URL. And we have to make this async. And then we check if is launchable is true, then launch URL. So there are a few things that are happening here. So first thing, we initialize the URL. Next, we call this can launch function, which is provided to us by the URL launcher library. And this returns true or false if the current operating system and configuration allows us to launch this URL. And then we check if it returned true and says that we are allowed to launch this URL, then we call the launch function. This is an error handling step, essentially. Next, we see this await and async keywords. All this is that this function is asynchronous, and asynchronous functions are helpful because they don't block the current execution of the program. We will dive more deeper into what asynchronous functions are and why they're useful in another video later on. But now, the await keyword allows us to not execute anything after this line until this asynchronous operation completed. So basically, it's waiting for this to complete, and then it goes to the next section. So this is all you need to know for now. So if I save this, and then I try to click on this, so you can see that we are going to LinkedIn. And then we can just do the same thing. So I'll just do this, HFD, D, and instead of LinkedIn, we can say GitHub, and then Instagram, and also here we'll say GitHub, and this one will be Instagram. And let me just remove the last one. So you can see now we have these three links. So this one goes to Instagram, this one goes to GitHub, and so on. Now there are a few things to make this better. So this this method right here, we are rewriting it every single time. So what we want to do is extract this out into its own method. So what we can do is here say future void and say open URL, and then async, and then we're gonna pass in the URL, so string URL, and then we'll just execute the same logic. So we'll copy this, paste it here, and then rather using this URL, we're just gonna use the URL that's coming in from the parameter. And then I'm gonna put an underscore here to make this private. And then here, I'll just copy this URL. Say underscore open URL, and then pass in this one. And then I'll copy this, paste it here, and here as well. And as we did, this one will be Instagram, this one will be LinkedIn. So there's a bit of new syntax that we see here. This is called an arrow function, and it's just a shorthand of doing a function. So rather than doing the function like this, as a shorthand, you can just use the arrow. So it will look like this. Now we also see here that the return type is future of type void, and you will use future whenever the function is asynchronous. And again, we'll touch upon asynchronous calls and futures in another video. Here, I'm just going to go back to the shorthand. And then remove this. So the next thing that we want to look at are badges. So we want to render these badges right here, and we're going to use the same wrap widget to render them in a row that can overflow to the next screen. So let's look at the logic for that. So in badges, first we're going to look at the different technologies that we want to add. So I'll say technologies, and it's going to be an array of type string, and I'll just add Flutter and Dart. Now if you look at our assets here, so assets, badges, you'll see you have a name.png. So we have, let's look at Flutter. So we have flutter.png, and we also have dart.png. So the names that we have here should be the names of the asset itself. Now rather than returning a sized box, I'll return a wrap widget. And then it will have an array of children. And then what I want to do is for every item in my technologies list, I want to render this card right here. So the card has an image and the text itself. So I'll do technologies dot map, and then I'll say technology, and then I'll return a card widget which takes in a child, the column, and then whenever you're using map, you're gonna say to list. And I'm gonna go over everything that's happening here. Let me just continue this. So in the column, what we want to render is an image. So image.asset, and we say assets slash badges slash and then $ technology dot png, and then I'll add text technology. And for this right here, we'll give it a width of 48. And you can see here there is not enough space between the links and the badges. So I'll go down here, and then I'll say const sized box height is equals to, let's make it 24. And you can see that there we have some space. So let's look exactly what's happening here. So we're doing technologies and then .map. So what this will do is it will go over every single item in this array right here. And for every single item, we are going to call this function. So what this function does is it takes in the current item in the parameter as technology. So for example, for the first item, technology will have the value of Flutter. For the second item, technology will have the value of Dart. And then we're rendering a card widget. And then inside of the card, we have a column. And the column has two items. The first one is an image that is rendered from the assets. And then we're giving it the URL. And then we're using the current value of technology in the URL. And then lastly, we're also rendering the name of the technology in the text here. So there's a few things that we want to do. So here, let's give this some padding. So I'm gonna wrap, I think there is content padding. So here there are a few things that we want to do. So let's add a padding to the column. So I'll just do this and then wrap this with padding widget, and all around let's do 8. So now we have some padding. And then also let's add some space here. So const sized box height is equals to 4. So now this will have some spacing between the logo and the text itself. And you can see that if we copy this and then paste it over and over and over again, save that, you can see that once we have more items, it will overflow or wrap around to the next row. Now we want them to be centered, so in wrap we'll say alignment, wrap alignment dot center. And then we don't want it to be too close to the sides, like here. So we will wrap all of these widgets with one widget, and then we'll call it padding. And then this takes in a padding property, const edge insets dot symmetric, horizontal is 16. So now we have some space from the side. Let's just keep 2 of them. Let's add some more. So let's add JavaScript. Let's add Firebase and save that. Now the .map function returns a new array, and the returned items will be what each function returns. So for example, technology, we're returning a card for each item. So we're going to return a card for Flutter, a card for Dart, a card for JavaScript, and so on. And then it will render that as the children property for wrap. And then the reason we need to convert this to a list is because if we don't do that, what map does, map returns an iterable object, and this is not compatible to the data type of children. So children expects a list of widgets, so that's why we need to cast this into a list. So we need to do toList. So the next thing that we want to do is the projects. So we need to add a new section called projects, and then we need to create the cards for each. So let's go to the project section, and then I'll render a container. And this will have a color of K light gray, width of double dot infinity, padding const edge insets dot symmetric, we want vertical of 52, and then the child will have a column, and then const text projects, then style, say text style, color is K dark gray, font weight or font size first is 28.0, and then font weight, you'll give it font weight .w500. Now what you want is that the scaffold background color to be white. You'll notice that the background color of the project section is a bit gray, but because the background color of the scaffold is not completely white, it's hard to see. So I'll just go back to the top, or I'll go back actually to the bottom where we have the scaffold widget, and then I'll say background color is equal to colors.white. And you can see now it's very clear where the project section is. Let's also add some spacing between the badges and the project section. So here I'll copy this and then make that, let's try 24. Let's make it 32. Okay, so now we have this project section and we can start adding projects. So I'll go to projects. So let's quickly look at what we're doing here. So we're rendering a container, and this container is everything here from all around. That's with the color that's gray. And you can see here we're setting the color to light gray. The width is double to dot infinity, so it's taking the entire width of the screen. And then it has padding of vertical 52. We should also add horizontal padding of 16. And this means that the space from the top of the container itself, but within the container, is 52 from above and below, and then from the sides we have 16. Next, we're rendering a column of items. So you can see here we have projects, and then we're just giving it a style. If I copy this, for example, you can see that we'll have the items rendered in the container like this. So the next section that we want to add are the cards. So we'll do another wrap alignment or wrap widget. And we're gonna give it an alignment of wrap alignment.center. And here we want to render each card. So we'll start off by calling a function that we still don't have, but this is what it will look like. So render project card, and basically what we want to pass to it is an image URL. So we'll say assets slash projects slash pokédex.png. So this is what's available to us here. So assets projects, and then you have Pokédex, Notable, CryptoSpace, and so on. And then the next item is title, and we'll say Pokédex, and then description, let's say Pokemon Explorer built with Flutter, and then visit link. It's going to be https pokédexweb.surge.sh. So now it's giving us an error because we haven't created this yet. So we can come here, and this is going to be a method that returns widget. And like we looked before at how to create named arguments, we're gonna say that this takes in a string called image URL, and it says required, so we'll add the required keyword. Next, it will also take in a title of type string, and then it will take in a description, and lastly it will take in a visit link. Now the visit link, however, we don't want it to be required because, for example, there could be some projects where you don't want to share a link or you don't have a link to share. So we'll make it optional. So we'll remove the required keyword, and then we have to add this question mark. And for now, let's just return a sizedbox.shrink. So you can see that this no longer gives us any errors. So let's look at the structure of the cards. So we need a card widget, and then we need a column. So the column will have an image, and then it will have the title, the description, and then it will have a row of action items or buttons. So we're going to say card, and then we'll add in child as a column. Then we'll have image.asset, pass in the image URL that's passed in. Fit, we'll say boxFit.cover. we'll give it a height of 200 and a width of 350. Next, we have we're going to render the title, and then the style. We're going to say text style, and then we'll add the color to be K dark gray, font weight to be font weight .w800, and then font size to be 20. And then let's add the description as well. Like so. So you can see that everything is centered for now, but we want it to be left aligned. So in the column, we're going to say cross-axis alignment is cross-axis alignment dot start. So in columns and rows, you have cross-axis alignment and main axis alignment. So in a column, the main axis is going from top to bottom. So the main axis would be aligning the items from top to bottom. In rows, however, the main axis would be from left to right, so it'd be aligning items from left to right. The cross-axis is the opposite. So in columns, it will be, rather than from top to bottom, it's from left to right. And then in rows, rather than left to right, it will be top to bottom. So when you say cross-axis alignment on a column, cross-axis alignment does start, everything is going to be from left to right. So start will be on the left-hand side. Now let's make this look better. So the card, we want to add rounded corners. So here we're going to say shape is equal to rounded rectangular border. And then this takes in a border radius property. So border radius dot circular and then 8. And let's also give it a side. So const border side. And then I'll say color equal to K dark gray. So you can see here we added some border. We'll also add the elevation of the card to be 2. And we'll add a clip behavior to clip.anti-alias with stabler. So if you noticed, if we don't have this line right here, you'll notice that the image doesn't respect the border radius. But when we add this clip behavior, it clips the image to be within the card. You'll also notice in the image we're adding a fit property with boxFit.cover. This allows us to zoom into the image to take in all the space. So if we have contain, for example, then the image just makes sure that the entire image is rendered and it doesn't fill the entire screen. That's why we want to use cover. Now we want to add some padding around the title and description. So we can either do it for both of them separately, or we can wrap them both in one column and then add padding to that. So I'm going to wrap them with a column, and then I'll wrap the column with a padding, and then all around. So actually let's do symmetric. Or for simplicity, let's just do all and then make it 16. Now, since we wrapped this with a column, this cross-axis alignment doesn't work anymore. So we'll take that and then put it for the nested column inside. Now let's see what happens if the description overflows. So let's see what happens if the description overflows. So if I type something like this, you can see that the size of the card just takes as much space as the description needs it to be. So in order to solve that, we will say overflow is equals to text overflow dot ellipses, and then max lines is 2. We don't want it to take more than 2 lines. And then we also have to make sure that the card has a maximum width of 350. So I'll wrap this with a container, and I'll say constraints, box constraints, 350. So you can see here, once it overflows, it's just going to do a dot, dot, dot. Let's also add some spacing here. So I'll say const sized box height is equals to 8. Now the title, let's also give it these 2 properties. So the title can have a maximum of 2 lines, and if it overflows, it will just add in some ellipses. We go to the project section, we have this title, and then the wrap alignment for the cards. So I just want to add some spacing here. So say const sized box, and then height is equals to 16. And now we can render multiple cards. So if we copy this, then we want one card for so the second project will be CryptoSpace, and here I'll say CryptoSpace, and then I'll say cryptocurrency tracker, and then cryptospace.search.sh. Next we have notable, and I'll change this to capital N, and then this to notable.search.sh, and then Chatly, and then here we'll have Chatly, and then chatly.search.sh. So you can see how we have all the projects. And so let's change the descriptions. So note taking made simple, and this will be real-time chat. And we're rendering the project rather than doing this. Let's just show the description. Now you'll also see that the column is no longer taking the entire space. So for that, we will come here, wrap this padding with a sized box, and give it a width of double dot infinity. So now it will make sure that it takes in the entire space. I want to add some more spacing between the rows. So in the wrap widget, I'll add run spacing to 16, and let's add spacing to also be 16. So now we have some spacing between the projects. Next, we'll add a visit button to the cards. So we'll go to the render project card method, and then at the bottom under sized box, we will create a new row, and then I'll say elevated button. This will be an empty function. Then I'll say text, I'll say visit. So we want this button to be on the right hand side. So for the row, we're going to say main axis alignment is main axis alignment dot end. And then let's also give some padding. So we want some padding on the right hand side, bottom and left, but the top we don't have to because there's already some spacing. So we're going to wrap this in a padding widget. So we're going to do this, wrap with padding, and then let's say only. So left 16, bottom is 16 as well, and right is 16. Now, when we look at the arguments passed in, the visit link is optional because some projects might not have a visit link. So that means that this value could be null. So in order to make sure that this button is not rendered and there is no error when the value is null, we can just make an if statement. So we can say if visit link is not equals to null, then we want to render this widget. Now, if you have an if statement without curly braces, that means that the first statement under it is nested within this if statement. But anything you write after that will not be part of the if statement. So here basically what we're saying is that if there's no visit link, don't render this button. So if I go here to projects and then I comment this out, for example, you'll see for the first link, it does not have a visit link or a visit button. Now what we want to do is that whenever we press on visit, we want to navigate to the visit link. So what we're going to do is here, we're going to reuse the method we had above, so open URL. Then we pass in the visit link. So here for any of our projects, if we click on visit, you can see it went to the link of the project, and so on. Last thing we want to do is the footer. So we'll come here, then we're going to render a container that has a color of K black color. And then let's also add some padding. So const edge insets. And we make it 32. And as a child, we will render a row. And let's render a text inside saying made by, let's make this lowercase. So if we look at the bottom here, so now the text has a black font color, so we'll change the styling. So say style, text style, color is equals to colors.white.